And Julie, okay. So committee, we are continuing our discussion of 9:55, which we will have out of here next Wednesday. I have been told. Um, but I'm going to try and get us through this because a lot of the fiscal stuff is going to change as a lot of the non-fiscal stuff fleshes itself out and is adjusted and changed as reality ensues. But we do have a job of doing clear definitions. Today, we're going to talk about the regional assessment districts, but Julie Marks, who is the founder and director of Vermont Short-Term Rental, got to watch the Boston, no R, short-term rental Alliance, is zooming in, and she wanted a chance to talk to us, and anyone is always welcome to talk to us. So, Julie, are you there? If you pop on, we will listen. There you are. Welcome.
Here I am. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee, for hearing me from afar while I'm currently on the West Coast. For the record, my name is Julie Marks. I am the founder and the executive director of the Vermont Short-Term Rental Alliance. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan association representing the vacation rental community in Vermont. We currently hold a membership of over 320 homeowners and property managers across the state, representing over 4,000 vacation rentals, which is about a third of the vacation rentals on the market currently. My
In Vermont?
in Vermont.
In Vermont, okay.
Vermont only. My experience personally, I have been self-managing vacation rentals that I own here in Vermont for about 8 years. I've also am a housing provider, managing long-term tenants as well, and I also offer midterm stays, which are kind of those multi-month furnished accommodations as well. I would like to start by just kind of reminding the committee about the important contributions that vacation rentals make to our state and especially our education system, as vacation rental activity is taxed higher than hotels at a minimum of 12% at the meals and rooms tax rate. And of course, that doesn't include any additional 1 or 2% local option tax that may apply or any other local municipality tax on top of that. So that translates to roughly between $50 and $60 million to the state's budget every year, just from vacation rental activity. And, these are supporting not only just homeowners here in Vermont, but more than 100 locally run small boutique property management businesses across the state that are supporting the employment of over 6,000 jobs here locally in Vermont. And I'm coming fresh off of this year's statewide tourism summit, where we learned that our tourist tax revenue have saved all of us, all Vermonters, an average of 1.3 hundred, so $1,300 in property taxes every year. A little bit more about who is operating vacation rental in Vermont. We know that the average owner owns 1.9 properties. So the distribution of ownership is really wide across the state. I know that there's a lot of chatter and rumors about corporate investment, buying up housing. The data that we have really doesn't show any evidence of that. There's often a lot of confusion or around property management companies looking like they own properties when in fact they don't. They are being hired by a homeowner to do a full service management of those properties while the owner is not in residence. Um, we know, over the years, and the VHFA has found that over 5,000 Vermonters, about 5,300 to be more exact, are short-term rental hosts. Um, and we also know that when people come and stay in a vacation rental, it often contributes to their decision to decide to relocate to Vermont permanently. We heard a lot about this at the Tourism Summit recently, how visitation is so important for attracting those future residents and giving people the experience to understand what it feels like to live in Vermont. Um, we also know that vacation rentals are generally, on average, hosted by Vermonters who are uh, 50 to 55 years old. So we're talking about empty nesters supporting kids in college, most likely. Uh, and then the majority are women. So that's just a little bit of background and reminder of the community that I'm here representing and that this sections of this bill are likely to affect. Um, the primary reason why I wanted to speak with you all today around the property tax classification proposals is really that um, one, to remind you about the economic burden that's already being placed on hosts, and again, a lot of them being residents here who are trying to supplement their income with a rental property or stay in their home by sharing a room or an accessory dwelling space, or maybe have converted a non-residential space into a rentable space. Because when we're talking about, and we're hearing a lot of different committees and a lot of different branches of our government talk about the affordability here in Vermont, we see this as an amazing opportunity to create affordability for homesteaders here. Currently, homesteaders who rent their property get taxed higher at that for that proportion of their property that is used as a rental, regardless of whether that's a 29-day rental, which falls under the short-term rental definition, or a 30-night rental, which falls then under the landlord-tenant law and definition of a long-term rental. For someone like me personally, who started renting out a portion of my home and then invested in building an ADU, and for several reasons. One, to use as guest space because we didn't have much guest space in our house, and three, to create an ADA accessible place for my parents or my husband's parents to provide care for them later in their life if needed. We only started renting in order to offset our property tax. And so having an added property tax on top of the rental activity that we're doing on top of the tourism tax just continues to eat into and take away any aspect of that opportunity that has helped us afford to stay and live in Vermont. And so we look at this as really an opportunity to actually provide a tax relief to Vermont homesteaders who share their home or part of their homestead property by removing that split classification on a homestead property. And again, I think in the case of a rental activity, it's a residential use. It's providing a benefit to our communities, whether it's because it's a 30-day, 60-day rental that is for somebody who is relocating or somebody who is waiting for their, or it's a visitor who is paying that tourism tax that's subsidizing our property taxes. I really believe that removing that split classification and making a homestead 100% homestead would encourage people to share their homes more and really make being a homesteader in Vermont more affordable.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
And, we have not taken up that section of the bill yet, so this will be very helpful when we get there. Senator Chittenden has a question.
Julie, I think I agree with you. I just want to make sure I'm not agreeing with every aspect, or I don't want to make sure your argument's the same. I agree that homesteads, that declared homesteads, which are Vermont residents that live there on that parcel that have an ADU and use it for STRs. I wouldn't want them to be treated that ADU to be treated as a second home and getting a higher tax rate on that with this new contemplated system, because that's not the same as non-owner occupied short-term rentals. Because I see you living in the same house where you're renting something out, you have an immediate interest, you immediate oversight, you've got reputational interest to keep calm in the neighborhood. You also have community responsiveness, but you're not that argument I agree with, but you're not extending that to non-owner occupied STRs, because I do have concern with the commercialization of residential areas with second homes being rented out in neighborhoods where the owner's not present. So you're not advocating for that, are you?
I'm not addressing that at this moment. No, I understand the difference there, and I think that this is I understand that focusing on the homestead is a really feasible opportunity, and one that aligns with our missions and values and at our association.
Okay, thank you. And we're going back to regional assessment districts. Kirby.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Kirby Keaton, legislative council. I may have misunderstood the assignment.
Okay,
I thought
what do you?
we were going to follow up on like where we were at for all of it, classifications and RAD. So I was prepared
Okay,
to talk
that
about
works. That works. And do you have a section by section of this bill?
There's the section by section summary that was put together by Beth and John and I
Okay,
for H955. My sections are in the middle. I think it's 30 through 64.
do we have that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's posted for today, but it's been shared with
It's out there? I think it is on me.
I actually have I was just going to, for my purposes, pull up the pertinent
Okay.
bill.
That's fine.
So my thought was,
On your first previous thought that you made, if you have interest to discuss or bring to the committee the conversations with Senator Ron Hinsdale about the synchronization of the rental definitions in H 933.
Wait. I just feel like things are going on that I don't know.
No, I've been CC'd on this. So this was from last week.
so
So
I'll tell you what I plan to cover, and then we can add to that.
Yeah,
if you want.
let's let Kirby go through.
So I have, there's 6 or 7 things.
She can come in.
well, it's my something that I sent you an email saying I wanted to bring this to the committee.
Okay, I still know what it is.
So they're the items that Department of Taxes brought up, and I thought I would address those with you and get guidance if you're ready for that. And then, of course, Rebecca is here to also
Okay.
to work on that. There's also Senator Cummings, that you did ask for an amendment at some point to 955. If you wanted to talk about that, it was about tax sales.
Oh,
So we could talk about
yeah.
that if you want.
okay, that's, yeah, that would have been better on miscellaneous, but we couldn't do it here. This is my little campground in Warren with the 1/10 of an acre lots that they can't sell because they can't go to tax sale because the total overdue taxes is like $10, and they'll never get up to the amount we put in last year that they have to, and they would like, most of these things have been they're in estates, nobody, family doesn't know they own them, and they're just like to be able to get their status cleared up and perhaps put that land, it's up near Blueberry Lake. John talked to us about that last week.
My kids like that place. And then I also have there's a technical thing related to one thing we walked through last time, having to do with appeals for grants.
Okay,
So, just go down and go down the list.
let's go down.
It's like,
You don't have something drafted that's posted or anything, reason for that.
no, but if, I mean,
Stuff.
if someone brings up something they've asked me to draft, I can share them. And I'm sure if Charlotte does that happens.
I've asked you to drop that was
Oh.
happy to share.
So the first, this is just going down the tax department's list from last week. There was a request to remove what they're calling the moratoriums on new mastery appraisals that are in here in section 53.
Yes,
Just to give you the background on this, this was originally put in, I think, when it was still part of Act 73 to transition from old system to RAD system. Rebecca's here to provide background testimony, but my takeaway was that municipalities are nervous about this. So the question, I don't have a whole lot to explain other than, do you want these moratoriums where there would be this date set where you, okay, now you've got to wait until the new system to start doing master appraisals? Or do you want to get rid of these, which could potentially allow for municipalities to keep doing their own individual mastery appraisals right up until the start of RADs?
okay, and I'm gonna look to Rebecca. The appraisals. The base of the CLA. If we tell towns you can't appraise until date certain, then their CLA, that's the transition, right? Going to the new one and the impact on the CLA, is that what the concern is?
Yeah, well, even, Rebecca Shamrock, Deputy Commissioner, Department of Taxes. Yeah, so I think we're recommending a change in approach here, like an adapting of the approach here, because, kind of having these moratoriums would, in effect, stop this 6-year cycle that we've, just kicked off and has really been, helping us ramp up in reappraisals. And that was, the bill, kind of supports the premise that these new reappraisal districts, like a town could reappraise if it was like doing it at the same time as its reappraisal district, but because the underlying bill timeline has been changing to allow the state and locals time to adapt to all the other ed reform pieces, this moratorium is still sitting here, but we don't have, a date certain, or the date of when tax will actually say hey, these are the RADs, they align with school districts, is now out in 2029. So it kind of creates this no man's land
where
in the
they're
middle,
going
right?
to get hit with the CLA.
Well, yeah, they don't even have, if they were successful in contract, we would love for the cycle to, keep progressing. And in the meantime, the PBR so I guess I should back up a little bit and say that, once the RADs exist as contemplated in this bill, the first round of municipal reappraisals, once we have RADs, is going to be okay, if you're a town and you're in a RAD, you guys should all be reappraising at the same time. And then the second cycle of that RAD, they'll all kind of and this is where the PBR director will have some discretion to kind of help onboard towns onto this cycle, because some may have reappraised really recently and they might get a buy. Some may have reappraised further along, but that's kind of, that individual touch that PBR will have to manage. It's not until the second round of the 6-year cycle, once RADs exists, that this bill contemplates joint reappraisals where the towns are going to have to be contracting at scale. And that's where a CLA could encompass an entire RAD, and we'll get those improvements.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we've got the moratorium because we were getting everybody on when in 26 and now it's out to 29 or 27. And so we said, don't do any more of your own, because we want to get you and 5 of your neighbors all into the same cycle. So we're going to figure out and that assumes that first year, all the RADs will do a reappraisal.
The assumption is that towns that are within the same rad will all reappraise in the same year, but not necessarily like, the whole state in the same year every 6 years, like 1 year it might
Okay,
be
because
these
I'm
couple of
wondering,
rads.
get
and-
enough appraisers. So, okay.
Right, yeah.
So some towns could get a long way out, like over 10 years. Unless we up that date.
Well, we're concerned there's like definitely a risk of shutting down what would otherwise be productive years and continuing the current reappraisal cycle while we all gel around like, what are these new school districts? What are these new rads? Like, hopefully, like they make sense to align. There's just like a lot of out year work to do, and this date certain so near.
When do you suggest we move it to?
Well, we would actually recommend just repealing the moratoriums wholesale, and then, like getting the
Once
lay of the
this
land.
gels, we will put another one in maybe next year. I mean, set it as soon as next year.
In the meantime, the PBR director does have some discretion to guide municipalities, but we definitely don't want folks to, start falling behind this early and,
Yeah.
implementing this cycle.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
So just to be clear, Rebecca, you think getting rid of, striking all of section 53? But there are multiple dates in here and multiple sort of
Right.
portions of it, so I just want to make sure I was clear and
Yeah,
understand. what
Again,
you're
of all the
asking.
things I printed, the actual bill text is not one of them, but there are 3 distinct moratoria.
Moratoria.
I think both-
Subsection A has those, and the subsection B was a report back yearly from tax.
Okay, yeah, so A, I
think
guess.
The question is,
So subsection A, there's 1, 2, and 3.
Mhm.
You want to get rid of all
Yeah.
3 of those. Okay, that's
That
what
would
I
be our
wasn't clear.
recommendation.
and that,
There was one.
which sections are we
we're
on?
in section 53,
That's what I.
there's subsection A and B, and Rebecca is essentially asking for subsection A to be removed,
Okay,
but keeping the yearly report back from tax on how this is going there.
okay,
Starting in 2028, 28 to 31, you would do an annual report.
Yeah, that seems we're gonna have a lot of attention on this in general. I think that, the reappraisal project is something that we're very invested in now, and I think we'll continue hearing, you'll continue hearing
and
from
we'll
us
continue
annually.
adjusting
Yeah.
as things, okay,
Okay, that's clear.
so we are striking
Great.
53.
Okay, so that's.
Not all of 53,
Not
this-
all.
just A, 1, 2, and 3.
So I would delete A, and then what is now subsection B would be just the entire section.
Okay, all right,
Okay,
that was easy.
few more to go.
All right,
Number 2, these first 5 are, from tax, and 6 also really. There was a request to remove the classifications appeal language in section 58. This is when I walked you through it. I told you that, not a lot of the focus so far has been on, figuring out the appeals for tax classifications.
yeah,
The
Um,
appeals for RAD, for the reappraisals though, this is where I got confused when you
I
were going
know.
there before.
I'm gonna talk about both those things. right now.
Okay.
Or that's a different item later. There is gonna be some talking about the RAD appeals, but this is,
Okay,
did I misstate? Or-
No, you said it right. I was just making sure. Okay.
So,
forget it.
so
Sorry.
this is, about classifications, I think. Section 58 is, yes. So what we have now is, what I would consider placeholder language, is keeping in mind that this becomes effective in 2029 and 2030. With some placeholder language that basically set up an appeals process where if you're appealing something relating to tax classifications, if it goes to a local level decision such as listing or a lister or assessor, deciding that you have 3 dwelling units and you actually want to challenge that and say we only have 2. That would be appealed to the town because that would be the assessing official making that decision. And then, and then subdivision, and subsection 2 is if your issue with your classification is that you filed a dwelling use attestation saying that your entire parcel is used as a homestead, and the Department of Taxes changes that and says, actually, we have information that a portion of it is being used for something else. And you want to appeal that change in your classification, then you would appeal to the department. So that's the gist of it, but there's pieces to be fleshed out here, which I would flag. So the department's request, and again, Rebecca is here to augment anything I have to say about what they said, but was to remove this for now. I think was the request. So as Ledge Council, I would say maybe not the best case scenario to put a new big system out there and not address appeals at all. But like I said before, this is not going to take effect for some time, so it seems like you have options. There could be a report back section added to the bill where tax comes back with language on appeals next year for your consideration. We could leave this as it is with the understanding that tax will come back. Or tax could offer new language, but I mean, the reason why the language isn't in great shape is because we just haven't had time. I doubt that they will either the next day.
We're in section 58.
And with section 58 at the end of it,
Page,
Yeah,
page
F.
103.
yep,
Use value appraisal.
page 103.
G, it's G, appeals.
G.
The top half of page 103.
Okay.
Oh,
there.
it seems. Give me, do my five.
No, go ahead. So your suggestion is that we delete that section and maybe ask for that from tax
I
or
mean, it's totally your call. I laid out some options there. I mean, a report back approach is the one that could work.
I mean, I hear you about putting in a new classification system and then not having any language about appealing, so I would be concerned about just leaving it blank. We could either leave this in and have you report back and say, what do you recommend instead of this? Or we could put in intent language that says we intend to have an appeals process, we're just waiting for a report kind of thing. Although that's a little hokey,
we love reports.
we love reports, yeah, and you guys love to do this.
This committee does not.
I'm just kidding, but I do think if you're, I mean, I don't know who would be reading this and not knowing that we're going through this major transition, but if there is somebody who's looking at this and doesn't see an appeal section, it might be concerned.
Well, we could, the section says appeals, and under that says tax department.
TBD.
Tax department shall recommend. Or we could leave this in and say the tax department shall recommend changes if appropriate to this.
Yeah, I mean, if folks are asking for
Yeah, we're asking
my
you to
opinion,
do
yeah,
it, so.
I think I would love to peel this out and replace it with the report back language from tax, like, on January. We had pitched 2029 because that's 2 years before the system would be functioning. But I also, if that feels like too being in 2026 today, if that feels like too many sessions from now, we could totally do it sooner as well. But I think
legislative memory.
I think as long as there's so much more that people are gonna pay attention to than how to appeal it. Before they even get something to appeal, if we have a heading that says appeals and the tax department shall, then we let anyone that's reading this know we're going to have an appeals process, but it's a work in progress.
yeah, and that is very accurate. It's something that feels very important to us too. We're expecting a lot of appeals, so we want to make sure we give it really solid thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I guess maybe it doesn't matter, but the report back would be in session law, right? It would be in.
That's correct. That's correct.
So it would, but
We can't do appeals to be determined.
I think there ought to be a timetable, at least proposed timetable, as to when the appeals process is presented back to us for action.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I
No,
was
we
thinking
will definitely have a,
January of 28. Could you do it by then? That's Rebecca.
Yes,
January of 28 you could do.
yeah, 28 session sounds great.
okay,
So a report back, but then,
which is before people will have gotten their bill with their notification as to,
well, it's 3 years before this goes into
Yeah.
effect, so.
yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah,
And
I think that legally, Kirby, if we just take out appeals and ask for a report.
I mean, yeah, you can do what you want. I mean, the worst case scenario is that, this is never followed up upon, it becomes law, you have the statute with the system that doesn't have appeals. That doesn't mean that we're not gonna offer due process to people. I don't think the Department of Taxes would take the position that like you don't get to appeal it,
No,
because we don't have that. They would have to sort it out based off of current law. And they would have to, like, by analogy, probably use existing other types of appeals and include the Senate.
but that
It
would,
would just be messy.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, that would assume that the tax department is not going to set up an appeals process. I can't see that, barring hantavirus or whatever shows up next
man.
month, shutting us off. But under all circumstances, the tax department says they will have an appeals process. I think I would trust them, and I know this legislature is not. If they ever come up with something by the 2028, we'll do something. Which is a high motivation for them to set it up, but it should be as streamlined and as easy. Because you don't want to have a huge backlog. And we don't want to have to hire 10 state employees to go up and walk through everyone's property to decide if that skyway makes it part of the main residence or not. I mean, whatever we come up with, so. And there will be challenges. I mean, there are old homes that have a stairway and a door, but there's outside entrance. And they rent it out. And it was once part of the homestead. There's a lot of those around here.
I think we're expecting to come back with a lot of new case examples to hone our definitions after the first couple of years of appeals, maybe the first couple of days. So, yeah, I know this will be a big priority for us as well.
I mean, this is probably more majorer, than Act 60. And this is a.
you're only saying that because Marcia.
He has my phone number, and my email.
All right,
So I think I have what you want there. We will remove subsection G entirely and we'll have a report back for January 2028 on a proposed statutory language for appeals. So number 3 that I have from Tax's presentation was the request to exempt buildings with 5 or more units from the non-homestead residential classification. This was for administrative reasons. So I would just flag that for that request, speaking as ledge counsel, I want to make you aware that that is a policy change. It would mean that you are saying that a building that has 5 or more units would never be, by law, would never be considered to have short-term rentals. Which of course, there are buildings that are that large that are just short-term rentals. So that would be, you're exempting those from the classification.
Right, so
You did.
That's not in the bill now.
No, but they had asked to do that, and it was part of their report,
They,
from Act 73 report. It was in there that they have maintained this request. Ways and Means did not grant it. And so Rebecca asked last week for this again, for administrative reasons, because it's a lot of, I mean, I just let her explain it.
Sure. Yeah,
yeah,
so, yeah, so like, current grand list categorization, which is different than classification, but we have these categories like residential 1, residential 2. Commercial apartment buildings are defined as an apartment building with 5 or more units. And, municipal officials are used to thinking about these as commercial properties, which is just the regular non-homestead classifications kind of more intuitively. And we would suggest keeping that, kind of like a categorization of commercial apartment buildings, folks that are in the business of providing apartments and housing, as non-homestead, non-residential, to avoid a pretty big lift for landlords, the department, and municipal officials if there are buildings that, like, say you have 20 apartments, but one of them doesn't meet the definition of a long-term rental, then we're in the business of the landlord having to, as part of this dwelling use attestation, fill out a form that identifies the use of each of the units, which is going to be cumbersome, and then the department having to, record that and ship it off to the town. So we'll then have to move some chunk of value proportional to the whole building from the category of non-homestead, non-residential, where all of their apartments are, into the second homes classification, and the underlying land then has to get adjusted by that ratio as well. So it's just like a whole bunch of steps and the question is, like, it is absolutely a policy decision, right? Like, but is the juice worth the squeeze if we're understanding that very few short-term rentals exist in these big apartment buildings?
okay.
Do you see a distinction between an apartment building owned by one person that owns and rents and collects rent all the units, and one that's condominiums where each condominium is owned by somebody different? And this would only apply to when there's one overseer, a landlord, that rents them out and doesn't.
Right. Yeah. I don't have a deep understanding of condos, but I do know that is a separate.
So
grand
condos
list
would
category,
still
yeah.
be declared as.
Condos are very different. And there's UCC having presented it on the floor, Universal Commercial Code for condos.
So condos would still have to go through the second home, the dwelling unit attestation.
And most of them there's limits on rentals in condos. They've written out whole sections of condos. It's usually some limitation on how a percentage that can be rented out.
I think the answer to your question, I would flag, is it depends on how we write it. Because if we wrote it in a way that says a parcel with 5 or more units, then the condo example would fit within that definition.
That's right.
That's how you write it. What I'm hearing the intent to be is if all of the units are put onto the grand list as.
There's only one tax bill for an apartment building. For a condo, there's a tax bill for a unit.
But how condos work functionally may not match. If you put it on the page, that might not translate.
But it's not condos, it's apartment buildings. correct?
Exactly.
And, okay, and then why the 5 or more units, why did you end up with that?
Like, we're just thinking about this piece, like identifying dwelling units, is going to sit with the municipalities. And this is just like a construct that they're already familiar with, because that's how the grand list is organized today.
Oh,
Like this commercial apartment category of property means a building with 5 or more units.
So if there's a fourplex,
Yeah, that would be considered residential, R2, which is a residence with more than 2 units. Yeah.
so what if there's a fourplex, this is where the flashcard came. What
I
if
can
there's
bring the
a
flashcard.
fourplex?
Can we get the flashcards?
We should, we can ask Source Shut, we can have the flashcards from the Ways and Means,
Can
but
absolutely get you flashcards.
but if it's a fourplex, and like 3 of the units are. There's an owner who lives in one of them, and the other 3 units are rented. 2 are long-term rentals and 1 is a short-term rental. Is that divvied up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is like classic mixed use. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah,
And
Okay.
that's in,
yeah.
it's. Once you get to commercial. Frequently, the landlord doesn't live in them, maybe generally 5+ units, you're in. To a square box. And there are I mean. I've been told in Burlington, but in other places, there are apartment buildings that have been bought up and are done exclusively for short-term rentals. I don't know that that's hit here. There are places in ski towns, but they're usually big old homes, not big boxes. So we could do that.
I think this discussion is becoming abstract. We don't have
Yes.
language.
Why don't we,
Which means that I feel like you might have an intent in your mind. But like I, as the drafter, do not at this
No.
moment know how we could do it, slice it the way you're talking about. I pulled up the X-73 report. Where the department had said multifamily dwellings with 5 or more units is the way that they put it, should be non-homestead, non-residential.
right, thank you.
I'm not seeing how you take condos out of that if you're basing it off of how many units are in a building.
It's ownership. A condo,
It's owned by somebody different than the building.
the condo, you own your individual unit from the wall in.
Yeah.
You have a homeowner's agreement. It's a whole legal construct.
So if you wanted to.
So if there,
Avoid ever paying second home tax, you would just put it so that your large building and short-term rentals were always unit by unit. Or no, you would avoid that. You would always
I
make
would
sure that they're
condoize the
together.
apartments and sell the apartments, which is done, especially in big cities.
No, then, so if it's a condo, it's a building with 5 units and it's a condo, then each unit has a different owner and they each declare them.
It's
Potentially as a
separate-
homestead.
It's 5 separate buildings. Our general condos. I don't think we have any condo.
No, these are not
apartments.
buildings, though.
Right, yeah. No, I understand.
Basically,
There's a difference between ownership and construction, basically. And so I think what Kirby's getting at is how does he describe this if we're gonna do this? And I'm still not 100% sure. I'd like to hear more from Rebecca, but
Well, we're gonna have to do something
if we,
with this.
well, the house doesn't do it. So
Right.
we don't we can go with what the house has,
Yeah.
which is, but to not go with.
Don't want to upset my town listers and clerks.
I just like to understand it a little bit more, but if it is a condo situation, it still could be a 5-unit building. So right now, Rebecca, how are people dealing with a 5-unit building that is
It's
condoized?
condo department.
Yeah, this is a good question. That's like a little out of my depth, and the depth is not coming over Teams.
Can you take
Quite,
it over?
yeah.
With the tax department?
Yeah, I would love to follow up with the brains that have been thinking about this issue specifically. Thank you for finding the language that we presented in our report, Kirby. I was just like, I swear we've written this somewhere, but
There's not,
it sounds like,
there's not statutory language in here.
oh, just the
It's
idea.
it's
Yeah.
an idea.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is about buildings. So Kirby's point is a really good one, is
Yeah.
that even if we have to figure out if we're gonna treat condo buildings different than not condo buildings, then how do you tell? And so it'd be nice to know how they deal with this already.
Yeah, there's condos in one building on one parcel.
I
And
know.
then there's condos that each one is well, no, sometimes there's frequently 2 and 3 condos
Yeah,
connected.
I know that this idea came out, as Rebecca mentioned earlier, the fact that there's already a category on the grand list marking whether a parcel falls into the 5 or more unit category or not. And I think that is where the thinking of the proposal came out of. But how that matches up with the statutory construct we have with our definitions now. I'm not sure I would immediately be able to get that right now.
Okay, because right now, I think there's 2 or 3 units attached over in Freedom Drive. I own one of those units. I'm in a homeowners association. I pay fees to them, but I get an individual tax bill. Because I have some ownership interest
Yeah.
in that, from the walls in. If I'm in an apartment, I don't have ownership in it. The landlord has ownership in it. So it's ownership interest that seems to be the difference.
I
but I'm
also
sure
just
there's a.
policy wise, we just point out, like, do you want this system to be set up in a way in which, let's say you have a house in Montpelier that has 5 units, right? And there's a lot of large houses that have been broken into 5 units.
There are.
And do you want the treatment to be different if those 5 units are all condos and some of the condo owners don't actually live there? It's like a second home and they just rent it out sometimes. But they would still, do you want that to have different treatment or the same treatment as if there's one owner of that building with 5 units and they use all 5 units for short-term rentals?
That's a really good question.
And
They're essentially the same thing.
But does
What would you?
current law define a common owner property with more than 3 short-term rentals as a bed and breakfast?
no, bed and breakfast would be defined, like if I'm following what you mean, by whether you're licensed through the Department of Health.
But you don't have to, if you have more than 3 STRs on the same parcel, you aren't obligated to file as a lodging establishment.
But there's, I'd love to reach out to Jen Harvey about that. She handles that regulatory stuff.
I think that might be current law, and that might already.
I can say that in the tax area, we have current law around the short-term rental surcharge is based on whether, the STR or the unit being rented out, the business is registered as law regulated. In that case, they don't have to pay the short-term rental surcharge. In other words, hotels or bed and breakfast.
I think that's an important discussion because that's kind of our concern. If there is a common owner renting out short-term rentals on the same property, more than 3, then we need to regulate that because they're operating operating bed and breakfast, and they need to make sure they have fire code safety, ADA compliance.
I think that's
Why I think there's current law, right?
It's been the intent for the classifications that hotels be taxed like businesses and not
Right.
as they.
Yeah.
That's my point is, if
Yeah.
they're doing this, they're a business, a hotel.
And that wasn't actually not in my flag today, but I did flag it last time I was here that it could be useful to add a provision clarifying that what we have here. Is that something that you want?
Clarifying a hotel. What a hotel is.
Basically clarifying that if you're regulated as a lodging establishment, and I would do the cross references for that, that those would not be included in the short or the non-homestead residential rate.
They would be commercial.
Yes, they will. Yeah, I would just say they would not be included as non-homestead
Not-
residential.
They have health and safety standards they need to meet,
Non-homestead.
whereas short-term rentals do not.
I think they should.
They should have tried multiple times and,
But I love a refresher on current law. because-
but I think there's now some of the big platforms, they're requiring fire extinguishers and alarms and things.
But I think, can we ask Kirby to add that language that he just suggested about
If you got something to say about it.
Very, very quickly, Madam Chair, Matt McMahon, I work with Julie with the Short-Term Rental Association. If short-term rentals are required to follow the regime under the Department of Fire Safety.
Okay,
So there is a safety regime there. It is a different for lodging. It's under the Department of Health, which is your ADA
I have
accessibility.
to go back and
different
check and
standards.
see how
But
many.
short-term rentals
basement
are
walls.
subject to oversight.
Okay. So, what did the House do with this?
With this request from the department? They decided not to.
They decided not to exempt. Or not to just say if you're 5 units. 5 rental units, your commercial rental. And. Okay, you're 5 and it's long-term rental. You're just assumed to be. A long-term rental if you have 5 units or more.
So
Or do you have to? File a landlord certificate.
Well, I mean,
absolutely not.
the definition for dwelling unit in the bill, it means a building or part of a building. Including a single family home, a unit within a multifamily building, an apartment, a condominium. Or other similar property or structure containing a separate means of ingress and egress. That is designed to intended to be used for occupancy by 1 or more persons in a household. Including private living facilities for sleeping, cooking and sanitary needs. And is fit for year-round habitation as determined by the commissioner. So that would, in a unit building that are all condoized. They would be considered dwelling units and could be either residential, homestead, regular homestead,
Or non-homestead or commercial.
or non-homestead residential. Meaning that they're rented out.
But like yes, and the practical, the practical result of what's in the House Pass bill right now is that, this is the part that, we're just flagging as cumbersome for a number of parties, is that a landlord of a big commercial apartment building will be filling out a dwelling use attestation with a line for every single unit, verifying the use of that as one of, which of these 3 classifications is it as it is.
So I'm generally supportive of what I think you're trying to accomplish. If we then segue this conversation to assuring that owner is in fact doing long-term rentals and not short-term rentals, because there is a definition of long-term rental as part of this, that is what my amendment.
But they could be doing all 3 in a large building. They could have some owner, maybe the landlord lives in one of the units, and then maybe 2 of the units are short-term rentals and 3 of the units are long-term rentals. So it could be a combination of all 3.
I would say they don't get the buy, they don't get if they have any short-term rentals, then they have to go through a more laborious process.
Right. Yeah, and
But
this
house is pretty much that.
I think so, yeah, so we would be in accepting our recommendation, we acknowledge that there would be, we'd lose some granularity there. There would be a short-term rental in an apartment building that wouldn't get flagged in a dwelling use attestation, unless a landlord just decided to do it.
It doesn't, I mean, I understand, and I don't do this work, but it does seem like. If you have a 5-unit building and they're all, what I just mentioned, that kind of split, then you would have. A landlord fills it out and says, this unit is my unit. This is a residential homestead, and then these units are short term, and these 3 units or whatever I said are long term, and then you just do the math. It's just a division of the number of units.
Totally, and I feel like that feels like very reasonable when you think about like a small apartment building for the communities that have big apartment
Yes, I
buildings
think-
where,
I think 5.
So, like, is it worth the squeeze to-
150 units or something like
Right,
that.
yeah, and
Does that exist?
In this discussion,
That's fine.
I have, I have mentioned that, some of these issues can also be resolved with how the forms are put together.
Yeah,
And that is part of this. It's how much information is being collected on the form, and are able to be options on the form to say, yes, I have 9 units. They're all long-term rentals, and just like and so I think that's why a lot of this competition, like I keep thinking of it, like it's all abstract right now because we don't have like real things we're talking about. And that's why I'm the role I'm trying to play here is like, let's make sure we're seeing things the same way.
yeah,
I just pull up here. This is when I was talking before about food and lodging establishments. This would be what I would reference going back to what we were talking about a moment ago with the provision stating that if you're licensed under this chapter, then you would never be considered the short-term rental.
and these are licensed by the Department of Health to be hotels
This is being
essentially.
regulated.
Or bed and breakfast.
Hotels, yeah.
This is not a Airbnb short-term rental. kind
Would
of
this be
thing.
Airbnbs?
No. Oh, yes, it would, they are registered.
I mean, it's, for one thing, this is not the area of law that I live in a lot.
Or just
But,
be-
but saying that, it's my understanding is that hotels sometimes have technically a short-term rental. Sometimes sometimes those lines get blurred and that's why,
So
from a
it's a-
drafting standpoint, it's good to say, are you regulated or not? And if you are unregulated, because I think there's a lot of messy situations out there.
Yeah.
I would also, point out that as the language that you have here, there's certain types of hotels under this language though, and this is why I brought it up in the first place, like a suite that is kind of its own unit with the kitchen and that has its own exit. Like that could, even though that we tried to draft things in a way where we're not bringing in hotels, that type of hotel would, under the language we have, be brought in and taxed as a short-term rental, even though it's regulated this way. So that's why I think that if your policy goal is to make sure that hotels are never effective, then I think that this is.
Then that would do it, and it would let,
And to the extent that any short-term rentals or what some person might call a short-term rental, or if they are regulated like a hotel, then as far as the treatment of this goes, it's very clear that they're.
anybody can rent a motel room for any number of days. I mean,
Pretty expensive.
it could get very expensive, but sometimes they will make a deal if you're here long term. Because your company frequently sends people here and
I mean, I think maybe it would be helpful to have, since it's not your general area of law, to just check in with Jen or whoever you said does it, and if that makes sense, then.
yeah, no, I think
Because I think-
that's what we should do. I
Because
think this
hotels
is the
and,
easiest.
and regular B&Bs, those would be taxed as
My understanding
non-residential.
is the question is at what point would what you traditionally would call it, think of as a short-term rental, at what point would it actually start to be regulated under chapter 85?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that your question?
And
And I-
Chapter 85 is the thing
What I
that's pulled up, yeah.
Yeah.
So that, if that's the case, those would be number 5, non-homestead, non-residential, correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
which is what apartment buildings.
Right, because those,
Yes.
even though people live in them, they're commercial.
The commercial.
Yeah.
The question is,
So much easier.
And
to
we
just use the
know-
word commercial.
you know, if the landowner, the owner lives in one of the units or the third floor, we know what to do with that.
I think that's the home, right?
Not on. What we don't know is how many landlords may be doing 3 long-term rentals. And he's got the third floor and there's 4 short-term rentals. Or without having to make every landlord go through and do a separate. Couldn't they just say? How many units, how many short-term, how many long-term?
I mean, that's like that would kind of effectively be what they're doing with their dwelling use attestation.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're, kind of like the crux here is that there's gonna be a lot to get this off the ground. So we're kind of pitching like, let's make it really streamlined and then, we can
Okay.
see if this feels like a loophole, come back at nuance. Like it's not, it is a big policy decision. So I don't want to minimize that at all. But, I think this is more about our administration.
Yeah, and I think
mostly
we don't
thinking about
want
our
to
partners
kill
in
the tax
municipalities.
department either.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we can just start off with your suggestion and say until date certain. Or until we find out there's a lot of cheating going on. This will be considered non-residential, non-homestead. Unless the landlord lives there.
I think the question,
Until date, and then say on dates certain. So push it out so that you have time to get the bulk of this stuff done. And then say any short-term rentals in those will need to be, we could stage it.
Well,
Because there probably isn't that big a deal that we know about.
I think I mean, this doesn't go into effect until 2031, so there's 5 years until, right? It's 2031.
When everything hits.
Currently, yeah.
It's so, it does seem like there's plenty of time, and if we're more decisive, then at least the tax department will know what they have to do and what forms they have to complete. Because if we start for one thing and then we move to a different one, then people's taxes are gonna change because it's
Oh,
gonna be different rates, and so.
Well, that's
I
what I'm
think
saying, five,
starting
you know,
with
in
what we-
5 years out, but there's,
I feel like there's gonna be too much.
these classifications have to go out and have time for appeal right before we set the grand list and start the new taxing system.
Well, appeals process,
And
ADD,
it's
but
really
But-
long.
I think the cycle would be similar to today, you know, where there's or it'll be like aligned with the rest of your, you know, property appeal
I should
cycle.
think
Yeah.
about when the new classification notices go out, when the appeals start, and when the new tax bills go out. You know, make sure that having just done when we went to the tap system and was the first reappraisal.
Going way back.
Oh, yeah, but found a lot of bugs. I think we had 300 opinions. And it was a whole summer of looking at properties. This won't be, I haven't got nice wallpaper and you shouldn't praise me that high. It's more the function. But it will take time and bodies to do it.
Relatedly, can I bring up the long-term rental definition in this H 955 and the amendment that I shared with you?
What have we decided to do with the part, let it ride for now? Or say,
I think your decision as far as if you leave it as it is, the question later becomes, is this too overwhelming for the department's administration? And you wouldn't find out until it happens. If you take it out, you would not be finding out how difficult it was. So I suppose the question would be, at that point, department, could you handle processing more of these? I guess would be the question, because you won't, and what you won't know is how many of these are out there.
I feel like this is something landlords can handle, and that if we have the forms that are clear.
well, that's, we need to make that.
Yeah, and they have 4 years to do it. And that there's too much room for gaming the system if we allow these large buildings to just be all one thing.
So we will let this ride. I think
It's okay.
what we need
The
that,
process.
but we will need to make sure that perhaps the reporting requirement is far enough in advance so that you have time.
I'll say that like I'm least concerned about the department's list here. I'm a
Yeah.
little more concerned about, you know, like these edge cases, these messy edge cases just create like the workload they create downstream, and there's like a kind of an awkward triangle in the way to do things here in Vermont where it's like information comes to tax, to the town, to the taxpayer, back to tax. So there's a lot of people touching the grand list and especially in this new system, just like, you know, moving the values around, things like that, but not,
Sorry.
yeah.
I was gonna say, most of the really big units that are maybe the more complicated ones are in more sophisticated towns, like
Fair
South
point,
Burlington.
yeah.
They have a much more sophisticated operation than
They have
lots of
staff.
smaller towns. They have staff, they have
a city
They have,
manager.
yeah, they have, you know, more, the smaller towns
Yeah.
aren't gonna have like a lot of these
Some of the
multi-family.
But, you know, like
smaller
a-
towns around ski areas though, where
True,
big
that's,
walks are being bought up. Lots of buildings.
And I also just want to assure that we will, you know, we can design the forms, you know, we have a lot of latitude there as long as we're meeting the letter of the law. And of course, we'll have like, you know, options to streamline things for units that aren't mixed use. It's like these mixed use situations that are gonna, you know, just be a little.
Take back our concerns and put your best brains on it and come back, Randy.
One of the things to consider is, this is a process that's going to take some time. If you look at appeals, they're going to be appeals every year, as there always are, to property tax valuations. And from here to 2031 and beyond, the training of the people on the boards of civil authority, which is largely absent, they are not going to understand this unless somebody tells them and tells them in a way that they understand. I think we have to think about in this process too. Because it doesn't, then what happens is it goes to BCA and it winds up getting appealed again and goes back ultimately to the tax department to resolve, and that will increase your workload. And that one way to simplify it would be to have rules that are clear cut and training that is clear to the people on the ground that keep those appeals from going back to you.
This one, I think, is a little easier because it either is or it isn't short term. It either is or it isn't. It's a little more cut and dried than what is the value of an average bathroom?
Mhm.
I saw a wide range and they were all average. And that, for somebody who is not a trained appraiser and has no experience, which was, I think, the entire CCA, it was, well, I think this is a really nice bathroom, so it got more. I finally decided a below average was an outhouse.
To me,
Above average
that
was
is a
spa.
significant weak link
Yeah.
in our process that holds things up that nobody is ever satisfied with. And again, still winds up back at the Department of Taxes.
That's a decent segue to the next item.
Okay, good.
And the next
Go
item
Kirby.
is, the next item, it relates, was, the department had requested to remove some, language that was, included in Ways and Means, kind of later in the process, which was not related to everything
Where are you?
else.
Page.
I'm currently on page 97. We're talking about, section 55, municipal reimbursement for abatement due to valuation errors. The department had testified last time that, they were concerned about this being used as a way to skirt the current appeals process. There you go. The current appeals process is very involved. Abatement is very informal, very discretionary. And after they pointed that out, I am prepared to say I see that also. That at least it would depend from town to town. But if you allow state reimbursement for abatement, you could have in some towns where maybe the Board of Abatement was very sympathetic to the residents of the town. You could have people skipping the appeals process, going and getting a Lister error, quote unquote, abatement, and then the state wouldn't be involved in that process. So I do agree with tax that I see that could happen if you make this change.
So what lines do you want?
I think just not making the change would be safer. But if you do still want to make this change, I would just point out to you that there would be a risk of some abuse.
This
Okay,
is
so you
all of
want in
section,
section 3,
All of section 55.
just delete the entire section.
the entire 55, okay.
I agree. In reading through this, I'm like, ooh, really.
I think the thinking was this isn't used very much right now, maybe not a big change, but once the department pointed out how people could use it.
There's always a few.
Yeah. So that's that change. They had also flagged something, that's in the next kind of one-off thing that was thrown in Ways and Means, not related to the next. It's just to add in statute that the PBR director will issue guidance relating to manufactured home parks and limited equity cooperatives. Their request, I'm in the next section now, section 56 on page 98.
Yeah.
So they had said, this is a niche thing that maybe should not go in statute under the director of PBR's responsibilities. To which, as Village Council, I would say you have other options. You don't have to put it in the statute. You could put it into session law. Asking the PBR to do this. I think the ask from the House side was at least some people were interested in having PBR do this. You could do it through session law. There's also been testimony from tax that they are indeed doing it. So if all you want is an assurance that they will do it, then you've got that and you don't need session law or statutory change. So those are kind of your choices.
Yeah.
Does anybody wanna,
I just want to say that I'm comfortable with the session law option if you guys are looking to do something. I feel for our PBR director that having it enumerated as one of her 11th duty like feels a little much in
and you are,
statute forever. Yeah, and this is like in the draft Lister handbook update right now. So
okay. So it's going in Lister handbook.
maybe other channels too, but that's my favorite PBR resource. So that's the one I like to look at. Great read.
Senator Hardy, I'm comfortable getting rid of the same thing. And I mean, if the House really wants it, we can put it in
Let's
session
give us
law.
something to talk about.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, so just delete section 56.
Short.
Next item. I have here that there's testimony about the tax being confused about section 18A and the interactive funding calculator. I
They didn't know
don't-
what that was.
It was a floor amendment, yes?
I don't have background on that personally. Beth was asked to write it, but my understanding was that Beth doesn't have a lot of background on either, because she was asked to write it, but that John and Julia would be the people to talk to. So what I would say is that if you want to respond to tax requests around section 18A, is that you should book John or Julia to come and
18A, well, we have to be.
We got an email
Yeah.
from the tax commissioner. I think it may have only come to you and me, but maybe we all got it,
We all
okay.
got it.
This section, they were confused
Yeah,
about it.
and no one knew what it was or what it, Becca.
Well, I think, it's less that, I don't feel that confused
Oh, okay.
by what it is, more like the why. It's been, as folks got in their inbox, like our commissioner is pretty concerned about it, like it feels like political and kind of has the potential to like do more work to kind of undermine the progress we're all making towards a transformation and consolidating districts than it would give information that would help guide people through the process that's envisioned right now in both House and Senate versions of that. And I have not been able to come up with a good reason to dispel that concern. It doesn't seem like a calculator that compares the current law versus foundation formula treatment of the districts as they are today would be useful. It seems like it's kind of more stoking the fear of folks that think that means a big tax spike if their funding's going up, or a big cut to services if their funding's going down. If you're looking at that in isolation without the whole other half of ed reform, the important part, which is changing delivery, economies of scale, getting to spread HR, IT, all the fun education stuff that I'm not an expert in, but spreading that over more students, and eliminating redundancies there, then you're only looking at half the story, and it's the scary half, I think, for both high spending and low spending districts. So
Well, also I would point out, this has it as fiscal year 27, and we won't know what the updated weights are by then. We won't know what people's enrollments or ADM is. That we will have the knowledge about the demographic information for students. And this is also a calculation that a decent business manager should be able to do for their district. So it does seem like an odd thing to be asking tax to do. And
it's also not tax data. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's really much more education if you're gonna ask anyone AOE, but I think this is premature and won't be very helpful to people. And I do think this kind of analysis will be important as study committees are trying to figure out how and if to merge and, you know, what will impact and all that stuff as they're looking at it. But again, I do
They have
think
an
this,
online calculator that anybody.
yeah, I do think business managers should be able to do this kind of analysis, or the, you know, consultants or facilitators that are hired to work with school districts. They can consult with the AOE to get data if they don't have data. I would be concerned about having you guys create some kind of online calculator that
Yeah,
might
that's what I
Same.
mean, what would it cost?
not accurate.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
that, yeah,
I don't. I mean, we can certainly ask that, John, but I would be inclined to see.
I think we got enough for tax to do that. Figure out
Okay, so delete 18 days.
how to do a calculator online.
Okay.
There's one on my phone.
So my,
Does this?
Well, I couldn't do it, but I have a feeling maybe he could. Chris could. Oh, well.
okay, so the next item I have is, this is, from me and also a discussion that, I had after my testimony last time with tax, and that is, if you recall, when I was walking through this, I'd said, you know, there were a lot of changes in the House. I went back and read this before coming to present to you. And my reading of 34, we're in RADs, in the RAD appeals.
What page?
Yeah, I'm sorry, page 73.
73.
Okay. So with the RAD appeals, when I went back to read through this, I did not recall a choice that was made to have property owner when they go to appeal to have a choice of skipping the RAD appeals board. I was like, I didn't remember that happening, but that's the way it reads. And I think we found the offender is this reference on line 19 to subsection A. That should be subsection D. And so I would say that it was, I don't know when this was changed, how that happened, but it's an incorrect reference, which has a substantive impact. So policy choice though, I think the House's intent was to not allow anyone to be able to skip an appeal to the RAD appeals board. You would skip, with this being a reference to subsection D, that would be the property valuation, PVR valuations that weren't done at the local level. And in that case, you would skip. So the intent.
Yeah,
You would skip the RAD appeals board when it was PBR being the one doing the evaluation of the process. You would go straight to the department with the appeal. That was the intent. Unfortunately, the language we have now, though, creates a lot of ambiguity, and my reading would be that anyone could choose to skip with us referencing subsection A.
and the pros that this would most certainly do it.
So.
You think changing A to D?
And it's more of a technical nature, but yeah, but changing A to D there, and also instead of saying elected to bypass, I think it would be better just to say bypass, because those subsection D, the bypass, it's not really an election. It is just, it happens. You would not ever go to the RAD appeal board with those.
Can you? So you're on. 73. I've got this divided up here, so it gets us.
Line 19 at page 73, I would suggest
18. All right.
just as the technical things would be to go as intended by that, like with what the House was trying to do, is to say agreed by evaluation and bypassed a board decision under subsection 419 D is what it should read.
And the taxpayer agreed by the valuation.
So yeah, I would remove elected and I would change the A to a D. Just want to make sure that you're perfectly clear that the consequence of this would be, there would be no election to skip the
Bypass
last
the
deal.
BCA would have to
Yeah.
go there and then go to the next step.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you go to after the BCA or the RAD appeals board after this,
Yeah.
you would go to either commissioner or the court. You could choose to skip the commissioner and go to the court,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, just like Carl.
Yeah, okay,
Okay, so
And,
this,
yeah.
yeah, this is, we're not changing current law.
Okay,
okay.
so. It's okay to make that change?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so that's it for the items I had, but there is Senator Cummings, we could talk about the tax sale thing that you had mentioned, and then also what I think there's other
Let's,
ideas in the room to go over.
and I would like to spend a whole afternoon, which we don't have, looking at those property classifications, just so we're really clear, that we haven't had time to sit down. So. Cameron is, what doing next?
That's the miscellaneous treasurer bill. And I ended up with your,
If you mean the testimony we received earlier about the owner occupied homestead, and that I would definitely love to dig into, if that's what you're talking about. I also have this, at some point, I'm gonna like to discuss the definition, make sure I do it.
Okay. Why don't you tell us what you want to discuss?
If you could go to page 100 of H955, I'm glad the Senator Rockland sales in the room. I've been following this in my morning committee to try to understand this. This is a new definition for long-term rentals that is not necessarily tested. And you notice if you look at this, it's currently an and, so it has to meet all three of these conditions. That raises a concern because there's a lot of unique one-offs. So types of rentals. So you could think about people that might rent for 2 weeks in a month, and then another 2 weeks later on, and then 2 weeks after that, or they might have a 3 month, it might be a get off the beat type thing. The point is, in H933, that was on the floor, we have a tested definition. It's time for other people to elaborate on it, but H933, which you'll see in this proposed amendment, I don't know if Kirby has it, is what we currently do for property tax transfers, testing for second homes. So that is a tested definition that we would, if there is a landlord certificate, or if a homestead's been declared, or if there's a bona fide landlord and tenant agreement, which is a easier test that we understand from tax department. And so this is new from Ways and Means, and I think it's worth elaborating on. If you'd allow, Madam Chair, or now or as future points, and Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Well, this is what's
Thoughts,
in the bill now,
correct?
and it says the bona fide landlord.
It's an and, though, it has to meet all three of these, which is the big issue. And if you look at the language I'm gonna propose, it's consistent with what we have in place with the property transfer tax. It's not, we couldn't approach an or, which I think would be an improvement, but this other one is more consistent with what's done in the.
Well, that,
I mean, I can show you the language, but I mean, just to cut to the chase.
yeah,
The other definition just removes the second part. It would be a property would be considered a long-term rental if it's rented for 30 days or more.
yes.
And just that really. But then, and in both cases, there's the bona fide landlord-tenant relationship aspect where the department could look into cases where someone's
This
trying to.
was
gain-
where my corporation buys a really nice condo or house on the mountaintop, and then my corporation rents it to me. That was the scam we were trying. That is not a bona fide.
That's actually covered
landlord-tenant,
under.
Because the landlord and the tenant are technically me.
I think it's covered in the second. So we're gonna say, Kirby?
Yeah,
wait, so your proposal is just getting rid of little I?
It's different, so it's
Okay.
consistent with H933. I don't know if Charlotte has that to share as an to you on April 30th.
It's,
when Senator Cheney refers to H933, he just means the part of the transfer
Thank you,
tax
Charlotte.
that transfer tax was amended in H933 to add the bona fide landlord-tenant language. That's what he's referencing when he says that.
This is that.
But this is, so this would be a new version that,
What page are you on there, Kirby?
I just pulled up a new document.
Oh, okay, sorry.
okay, yeah,
Okay.
I-
This isn't posted.
Oh, this is amendment. Okay,
This is now on the website.
okay.
okay, I'm refreshing
Got it.
on that.
So it would change the definition by, I mean, essentially, essentially, like I said before, it just takes out the total of 6 months requirement. But by referencing the landlord certificate, like the transfer tax does, that effectively means that you have to rent for 30 days, because that would be at the point at which you were required to supply a landlord certificate. So it would be 30 days, and that's it, really. And then if the department later
Well, how
wants
do I
to
know
look
you're
into it,
renting
they
it for
can.
30 days?
What's that?
How do I know you're renting it for 30 days or more?
Attestation, right? So they attest.
So under the transfer tax, there's this requirement that this the second home rate, the new high rate, but you
Yeah.
don't have to pay the highest rate if you were going to use the property and rent it out in the coming year.
Right,
And that's proven for transfer tax purposes by filing a landlord certificate to show that in the next year you rent it for at least 30 days, because that means that that's when you have to file a landlord certificate.
but if I buy a second home,
Yep.
all right, and I live in South Texas and or in Louisiana, and I want to come up here
Mhm.
all summer, but I hate the cold. So I rent it out for 30 days in January.
Yep.
That makes this not a second home, it makes it a long-term rental.
That's correct.
No.
So, okay.
That just opens a massive hole that any smart accountant or attorney is going to be able to figure. I've rented to my college kid for a month. And then it sits vacant for 5 more months, and I come up here and ski or summer or winter. To me, the deciding thing is, this is your residence. If it is your residence, you are all income tax, unless you're too poor, but you were registered, you owe taxes to the state of Vermont, basically income taxes. You're a resident. If you're a millionaire, you're gonna pay whatever we end up doing to millionaires. If you are not a resident, you live here 5 months and 29 days, and you rent that out for another month,
Mhm.
then you're a long-term rental, but you're not.
So this is currently drafted as a amendment from Keisha Rumkins and myself to
Yeah.
this, so we don't hear from her now, we hear from her later, and you could, if there is time, I think the arguments.
It is welcome to be heard, but I see it as opening a really big. Okay, sure.
Can I?
Oh, you can be open.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm not gonna move Kirby.
No, that's fine. I mean, this used to be my chair. So, for the record, Senator Keisha Rom Hinsdale. So the crux of the question, Madam Chair, and you served on the Housing Committee. Right now, for all intents and purposes, in landlord tenant law, 30 days means you enjoy all of the rights of a long-term tenant. The municipalities that have essentially banned short-term rentals like Burlington or Ripton use a 30-day marker requirement. The reality is most people, when we wrote the property transfer tax piece that we all just recodified, and that's represented here, I would ask people to keep in mind when we all wrote that, we were worried about people gaming the system because it is a hefty increase in the property transfer tax, and it came in over forecast. So I don't want to upend all of landlord tenant law to worry about people who are gaming the system. There are many, many Vermonters who rent their property for somewhere between 1 to 6 months of the year. And I see that as a value to the state
where they are not leaving it vacant, they are treating it as a long-term rental under our current practice of a long-term rental being 30 plus days. If all of the people, and you know, the whole bona fide landlord-tenant relationship piece, you know, what I appreciated about what was added this year in H 933 is that you have to determine the negative, not the positive. Because in addition to 30 days being the standard across the board in landlord tenant law, the landlord certificate and the homestead declaration are existing forms that over 90% of the Vermonters require to file. When we heard in the housing committee, after many years of working to get the landlord certificate taken up more, that were, oh, this is your chair, that were at over 90% use rate. Those are people already attesting that they are indeed a landlord for a long-term rental of 30 days or more. If what we wanted to do is say that now a long-term rental is 90 days or more, or 180 days or less, or whatever amount of days, we would want to change the landlord certificate, because tenants receive benefits and they receive rights after 30 days of tenancy somewhere. So it truly, I mean, you all sit on this committee because you know and believe that tax policy influences other policy. And if a landlord has an informal agreement or, you know, rents to people month to month, they are going to have to change all of their policies and practices to meet this brand new definition. I will also say Burlington does charge via code enforcement per dwelling unit, and there's always a lot of back and forth about what constitutes a dwelling unit. So these definitions are housing policy. And if we are now saying your benefits as either a non-primary resident, primary resident, or long-term renter are all tied to your experience of tax policy, you are going to make significant changes in existing landlord-tenant law.
Okay,
We have 4 years to figure this out.
no, there's two things at play. One is I rent to you. Usually it's 30 days, but very few landlords just rent for 30 days.
Many rent for 90 days, the whole
90 days. Maybe. But long-term rental, generally, there's an expectation that if you're a good tenant, you're going to renew and you could stay there. If I'm looking at a condo in a ski area and I rent it out for 30 days and just 130 days a year, that's giving me a significant loophole in the taxes, which will give a significant cut in the revenue that a second home tax is going. I mean,
so, but we are going to be taxing a lot of people who rent between 1 to 6 months, those units. And there are many, I would even say so we've studied very deeply in the housing committee what kind of behavior we have in different parts of the state. And that's why I've said to the major ski areas, you should set a ban on short-term rentals, because it's only a problem in about 5 or 6 municipalities in the state, Burlington and the ski areas. We have this data. And if Stowe did that, what they would say is you can't rent for under 30 days. That's how the policy works. If that's banning short-term rentals. So if you make all these changes, I don't know what you're saying to places like Burlington, Ripton, and other places that have essentially banned short-term rentals, because we have traveling nurses and, you know, seasonal folks and electricians and other people who rent from between 1 to 6 months all the time. It is the medium-term market. And I don't even know, I mean, tax can answer this for themselves. Obviously, I'm meeting with them later, but we have 2 existing forms that say I either rent for more than 30 days or I am a homestead declarer. I live in the state and I pay income tax. If we change the definition of who's required to, and we have a new form called a DUA and things like that, they're simply attesting to the same things we're asking them to attest to under the landlord certificate, except now they would have to show in advance, I think, either a bona fide landlord-tenant relationship, either to their municipality or to the state tax department, or they'd have to piece together evidence of 6 months of rental from many short-term rentals, not really sure. And I'm not sure if they have to prove that in advance to get the designation, but I would also just say, you can't look at a unit and value it based on whether or not it's used as a primary residence or a non-primary residence, because they can change their behavior year to year.
So, I mean, the way I'm looking at the definition that's in the House version is that it maintains the 30 days, which seems to be the priority
At
for you
least
guys.
30 days.
At least 30 days.
That's
The thing that it does is it says that you can't just have 30 days, you need to have multiple 30 days. So if there's a rental for 30 days, which, you know, there's a nurse coming in and renting it for 30 days, and there's another nurse coming in renting it for 30 days, that the unit, the dwelling unit itself needs to be rented for more than 30 days. It's not the person, the rental. The rental landlord tenant relationship could still be 30 days, but the unit itself needs to be occupied for more than 30 days. Otherwise, it's a second home, as the chair's example specified. Because so I don't think it's it's not trying to disrupt the 30-day landlord tenant situation. It's trying to say, we're looking at the unit itself and making sure that it is in the long term being rented out. It doesn't say that it has to be the same person. It could be 6 different people. But it's just being used for renting for a long term, which is defined as at least 6 calendar months. That doesn't have to be consecutive. It could be, you know, a few months.
Between the parties doesn't imply just 2 parties. You'd agree with that, Kirby? Between the parties could be.
Yeah, between the parties, the landlord and
You
the.
know, I want to stress like it seems like there is some confusion about that provision. It's not something that has to be proven the way this is written. It does not have to be proven on the front end, because it would be kind of a weird thing to have to prove.
Yes.
It's part of the definition, which means that if tax questions whether there's a bona fide relationship, they would have the ability with this definition to go look at it. I don't think legally it's different than the language we just looked at. I think in both cases, it only comes up if the regulator or the administrator, in this case, part of taxes, needs to look into that. The other language is fleshed out more because it was the language used for the transfer tax, where it does actually kind of define a little bit more of what that means. Both sets of languages, I would say, they both came from the Department of Taxes. The transfer tax change was a housekeeping suggestion they made for H933, and this language came from the Act 73 report that they submitted. So Rebecca has her hand up, so if she could opine if she thinks.
Well, I think I'm about to send tax to look at this. The state's property transfer tax you pay once. Okay. So the tendency to cheat there is less than this is a lot more money involved and it's ongoing. So the more loopholes there are, the greater the temptation to use them. So,
Madam Chair, if I may, the opposite is true, which is you will see less 1 to 6 month rental agreements. You will see more need to determine a bona fide landlord-tenant relationship in advance, which currently we have many informal landlord-tenant relationships. This will impact the types of housing and rental options that are available to people. And I just want the committee to really take that on board.
I don't think that is true, because it would still be, if you have a house that you rent out, or an apartment, whatever, the
Your
unit,
pool house and
that
you've
you
got
rent-
your mansion sitting next to it.
and you rent it out multiple times to multiple different different tenants. It's still a landlord, a bona fide thing. The bona fide is like, I'm not gonna rent it out to my daughter, wink, wink, and be able to call it a long-term lease.
Yeah.
It is that there's a real landlord tenant.
But if you rent it to your cousin, is that okay?
Well, it is trying not to get around the fact that you're actually renting it to somebody. And as Kirby explained, it's something that would be used for verification purposes only. This is meant to show that this unit, this house, this apartment, this whatever, is being used in a long-term rental, whether it's 6 different tenants over a course of
One
6 months per year, or
year.
1 for 6 months. It's still
6
being
years.
used multiple times, not just 30 days in a year, so that,
I can pay less.
so
Well,
that.
I will
yeah.
just say though, the reality is when you rent for 30 days, you have significantly more rights as a tenant. We've long been proud.
Yes.
Right, and we're not doing anything about the tenant rights here. It does not take away from the tenant
If you're
rights.
there for 30 days, you have the tenant's right.
Absolutely.
To
does not
say that,
impact it.
if you create an agreement with somebody that they're gonna rent for longer than 30 days, you essentially enter into a bona fide landlord tenant relationship
Yeah.
that makes it very hard to get them to leave and very
Okay.
hard to,
Yeah.
so it does still change the dynamic of landlord tenant law to say, now 30 days just doesn't count.
It does
A
count, though.
long-term rent.
It's right there in I. It does count.
Okay,
You
I'm
still
going,
have-
I'm going to send, I'm gonna let
Thank you
tax,
for giving time for that. I appreciate it.
have some time, digest this. We might have to have VHFA and what I believe is the depositor of the information on short-term rentals and plan, but, and I think we might need to get our housing drafter in here to talk.
Good to get this conversation going.
Thank you so much.
Oh my
Well,
gosh, there
I-
are some, but.
I've got witnesses and we've got one last bill and the office is up there.
And the third
And-
one is just.
We ended rather abruptly. Is Senator Madam still with us? We have H567. Yesterday, which started out with, yeah, we are getting set, I think, to do it as drafted, right? We didn't ask for any. And you have a request, yes. And
It's posted. I've shown it to the treasurer's department.
okay,
It is,
because they were concerned yesterday that everything was vetted by everybody
well,
and that this could mess up the clean little bill. So I will
the
hear
deputy treasurer is behind.
from the treasurer's office. Why don't, Cameron, you tell us what it is? And then we'll let the treasurer's office tell us if they like it. And I'm not finding it.
It's under Cameron's.
It's
Oh, it's under Cameron's.
Cameron.
Yeah. I mean, can I just give an overview?
Is this different than what you gave us the other?
Yes, it's different. What I had said yesterday was to change the council. There was discomfort with that. The treasurer's office and I asked about a report back. And the treasurer's office said that they would be okay with the report, so I tried to draft a report back that sort of got to some of the questions. And this is a report back by next January about mechanisms, including requiring consultation with the council for ensuring appropriate fiduciary oversight of the use of the fund. expand or modify the membership of the council to include student representatives, and then how to expand the scope of the scholarship awards, including amount, types of degrees covered, and institutions covered. And that they consult with the council itself and also the student organizations at the institutions of higher education. It's just a report with recommendations on those three things.
So we don't press the treasurer's office. Treasurer's office, you have a,
We have no problem with this.
okay.
Generally fine with it. I was listening yesterday. Thank you, to Senator Beck's points yesterday.
Walking down the hall.
On line 14, I was my boss of 15 years. was
Yes, I
hiring,
know.
I had to be there. All right, so on line 14, I'm completely fine with this. I'm just wondering to Senator Beck's concern, and I think that's valid, that we can't give away our authority, the requiring. Do you feel like the requiring is necessary? It was just mechanisms, including consultation with the Vermont Endowment Trust for Ensuring Appropriate Federal fiduciary oversight, because we can't require them before we want to do what we want to do with money.
We can get rid of the requiring it if that makes people more comfortable. And yes, we can't, the intention wasn't to have them say whether or not we could do something. It's rather just, what's your opinion? Tell us your opinion. And then we can ignore it. if
It's
we
a
want.
requiring consultation.
Sure.
Yeah,
We can always say notwithstanding.
and we
Talking
can,
to anyone.
like, we ignore, we collectively ignore lots of recommendations from reports or whatever. I mean, or we follow them precisely.
Committee, what is your pleasure?
I'm fine with this.
What does Grady think?
He's okay with it.
All right.
It's okay.
Thanks, Grady.
I hope he's happy, napping or playing. All right. I need a motion.
Go ahead.
Cameron.
Yes, ma'am. For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. I just want to bring up one small point. It is drafted as an amendment from Senator Hardy. So if you all would like it to be an amendment from the committee, I have that ready and can share it. I just want to make sure you know what you're
Well, we have-
drafting on.
Did we both spill out?
No,
No.
no.
So why can't we can just amend it now?
Yeah.
And then it is part of the bill.
Yes, ma'am. That's what I'm saying. I
Yeah.
have a version that
Yeah.
is, the version you were looking at that's
Yeah.
posted online is from Senator Hardy.
Right.
But I have a version that would be from the committee if you would rather vote that.
The cleanest, yeah, I mean, if we're not presenting it on the floor, so if this committee votes to amend the bill and then we vote in favor of the bill, then
You want to presume the language is coming from the committee, so.
yes, if we vote for it, it's ours, we own it.
Do you have that
Okay.
posted?
I will share it for posting in just 1 second.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. Thank you, David, and please.
Hello, thank you. I think we just need a draft number and I'd make the motion when I get it.
It will be draft number 1.1 because it will be a committee amendment as opposed to the individual. amendment.
I
will move,
Oh, you're, all right, we've got a
or
second.
you're doing that, that we amend, H 567 with draft 1.1.
So moving
As
this favorably with amendment draft.
No,
Yes.
Chris,
First,
first we amend, then we approve.
okay, so there we go.
Yes, Senator Hardy has moved that we amend H 567 with draft 1.1. And I'm assuming it's dated 5/7/26.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
And I will share it on the screen here just so you
and
see it very quickly.
this would. Okay. it is
So it'll be
coming-
draft 1.1 dated 5/7 and it will come from the committee and all of the language remains the same as it was just presented. from Senator Hardy.
Okay, is there any further discussion? If not. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed say no. All right, I'm seeing that as 601. Okay, now I need a motion to approve as amended.
I move H567 as amended.
Senator Hardy has moved that we approve H567 as amended.
This is the vote on recording.
This,
Yes.
yeah, we're going to do this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. I'm calling that 601, so you could put a check next to everybody but Senator Gulick, who is absent.
Would you like me to report it? I made a big deal out of it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay,
Thank you,
committee.
committee.
Thank you. We are going to have to really buckle